The fluorescent lights of the Millbrook County Courthouse cast harsh shadows across Sarah Collins's face as she stood behind the defendant's table, her trembling hands gripping the worn wooden rail. 6 pairs of eyes stared up at her from the gallery benches, her sons ranging in age from 4 to 14, each one trying to be brave while their world crumbled around them. The youngest, Sam, clutched a tattered stuffed dinosaur while tears streamed down his cheeks, too young to understand why Mommy had to stand in front of all these strangers. Judge Patricia Hamilton's voice echoed through the courtroom with cold efficiency as she read from the legal documents that would determine their fate. The state of Colorado had initiated proceedings for emergency guardianship transfer due to Sarah's inability to provide adequate housing and care for her 6 minor children. The medical debt collectors had finally won, and now the family faced separation unless someone stepped forward to take legal responsibility for all 7 of them. Sarah felt nauseated as she watched the small crowd of potential bidders evaluate her family like livestock at a county fair. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. There was Richard Blackstone, a businessman whose reputation for exploiting desperate situations preceded him into the room. His calculating gaze swept over her sons as if assessing their potential value as unpaid labor. Across the aisle sat Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, a wealthy widow who had made it clear she was only interested in adopting the youngest boys, leaving the older ones to face an uncertain future in the foster care system. The air in the courtroom felt suffocating as Sarah realized that in mere minutes, a stranger would own the legal right to make decisions about her children's lives, their education, their medical care, their futures. She had volunteered for this humiliating process only because the alternative was watching her boys scattered across different foster homes throughout the state, potentially never seeing each other again. At least this way, they would stay together, even if it meant surrendering her maternal rights to someone she had never met. But as Sarah stood there, feeling more broken and defeated than she ever had in her 32 years of life, she had no idea that the man who would change everything was sitting quietly in the back row, his prosthetic leg hidden beneath perfectly. Oppressed jeans, his calloused hands folded in his lap as he studied her family with an intensity that had nothing to do with exploitation and everything to do with recognition of shared pain. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows of the small apartment that Sarah Collins had managed to keep for exactly 3 more days before the eviction notice would force them onto the streets. She stood at the stove, stretching a single can of soup into breakfast for 7 people, adding water and crackers to make it last while her 6 sons gathered around the scratched dining table that had been a wedding gift 8 years ago. Back then, she and David had dreamed of filling a house with children's laughter, never imagining that those same children would one day face homelessness because of choices that seemed inevitable at the time. Tommy, her 14-year-old, sat at the head of the table trying to maintain the dignity of being the man of the house since his father's death 2 years earlier. His shoulders had broadened over the past months, and Sarah noticed how he unconsciously straightened them whenever. The younger boys looked scared, as if his posture alone could provide the security their family had lost. He had stopped talking about trying out for the high school football team, understanding without being told that such luxuries were no longer possible when every dollar had to go toward keeping them fed and housed. 12-year-old Jake had inherited his father's mechanical aptitude, spending hours tinkering with broken appliances and bicycles he found in dumpsters, hoping to repair and sell them for a few extra dollars. His hands were already stained with grease and calloused from work that should have been play, but he approached each project with determined optimism that broke Sarah's heart. Just yesterday, He had presented her with $17 earned. From fixing a neighbor's lawnmower, his gap-toothed grin shining with pride as he placed the crumpled bills in her hand. Danny, 10 years old and gifted with an artist's soul, had stopped drawing pictures of their family after David's funeral. His sketchbook now remained closed, and Sarah suspected it was because he could no longer bear to create images of happiness. When their reality felt so fragile, she had found him crying over his colored pencils the week before, not because they were broken, but because he feared they would have to sell them for grocery money. The thought of her sensitive middle child losing his creative outlet felt like another small death in their accumulating losses. 8-year-old Ryan bounced in his chair with the irrepressible energy that had earned him the nickname Rocket from his father. Even facing uncertain futures, Ryan approached each day with enthusiasm that seemed to defy their circumstances. He had organized elaborate games to keep his younger brothers entertained during the long hours when Sarah worked double shifts at the hospital, creating adventures that transformed their cramped apartment into spaceships and castles. His resilience inspired the whole family, though Sarah worried about the weight of responsibility he had unconsciously assumed as the family's chief morale officer. 6-year-old Luke had retreated into books when reality became too overwhelming, spending hours at the public library where the stories provided escape from their mounting problems. He read voraciously, often finishing chapter books in single afternoons, and Sarah treasured the moments when he would share fascinating facts he had discovered about dinosaurs or planets or ancient civilizations. His quiet intelligence reminded her of David, who had also found solace in learning when the world felt chaotic. 4-year-old Sam remained blissfully unaware of the full scope of their difficulties, though Sarah noticed he had become more clingy in recent months, often refusing to let her out of his sight for even brief periods. He still believed that Daddy had simply gone on a very long trip and would return with presents and hugs, and Sarah couldn't bring herself to shatter that innocent hope, even as she struggled to explain why they had to keep moving from place to place. The apartment that had housed their family for the past 6 months represented the 4th place they had lived since David's death. Each move necessitated by their deteriorating financial situation and Sarah's inability to keep up with rent payments on her nurse's salary. She had been forced to reduce her hours at Mountain View Hospital when the boys' school schedules changed, and the loss of income had created a downward spiral that seemed impossible to escape. The medical bills from David's extended stay in the intensive care unit had consumed their savings, their life insurance policy, and eventually forced them to declare bankruptcy. David Collins had been driving home from his job at the county maintenance department on a rainy October evening when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into his pickup truck at 60 miles per hour. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The impact had crushed his chest and caused traumatic brain injury that left him in a coma for 7 weeks, while Sarah maintained a bedside vigil, praying for a miracle that never came. The hospital bills had accumulated with terrifying speed, reaching nearly $300,000 by the time David passed away, leaving Sarah with medical debt that followed them like a persistent shadow. She had tried to negotiate payment plans with the various medical providers, explaining her situation and requesting reduced settlements. But the bureaucratic machinery showed little sympathy for a widow struggling to support 6 children. Collection agencies called daily, threatening legal action and garnishment of her wages, while creditors placed liens on any assets that might have provided financial relief. The modest life insurance policy that should have provided security for the family had been consumed entirely by funeral expenses and outstanding medical bills. Sarah's nursing degree had once represented stability and professional fulfillment, but the demands of single parenthood made it increasingly difficult to maintain the demanding schedule required by her profession. She had been forced to turn down overtime opportunities and night shifts that would have provided additional income because she couldn't afford childcare for 6 children. The few babysitters willing to watch such a large family charged rates that exceeded what Sarah could earn during the shifts they would cover, creating an impossible mathematical equation. The breaking point had come 3 weeks earlier when the landlord of their current apartment delivered an eviction notice, citing missed rent payments and property damage caused by the normal wear and tear of housing 6 active boys in a space designed for a much smaller family. Sarah had begged for additional time, offering to work extra shifts to catch up on the past due balance. But the landlord had grown tired of her promises and decided to pursue tenants who could pay consistently. With nowhere else to turn, Sarah had contacted the state social services department, hoping to find temporary assistance that might allow her to maintain custody of her children while she stabilized their housing situation. The social worker assigned to their case, Janet Meyer, had explained with clinical detachment that the state's resources were overwhelmed and that the most likely outcome would be placement of the children in separate foster homes until Sarah could demonstrate her ability to provide adequate care. The thought of her boys being scattered across different families, possibly in different cities or even different states, had filled Sarah with a desperation that bordered on panic. She had spent sleepless nights researching alternatives, calling distant relatives who had their own financial struggles, and investigating every possible option that might keep her family together. It was during one of these desperate internet searches that she had discovered the legal guardianship transfer process that allowed families in crisis to voluntarily enter into arrangements with qualified guardians. The process was humiliating and emotionally devastating, requiring Sarah to publicly acknowledge her failure to provide for her children while submitting to evaluation by strangers who would determine their family's fate. But it also offered the possibility that her boys could remain together, possibly even maintain some relationship with her, rather than disappearing into a foster care system that had no obligation to preserve sibling connections. Sarah had completed the paperwork with shaking hands, answering invasive questions about her financial history, her parenting capabilities, and her children's special needs or behavioral challenges. The process felt like a public admission of defeat, but she reminded herself that protecting her children's relationship with each other mattered more than preserving her own dignity. The boys needed each other, especially Tommy and Jake, who had stepped into protective roles with their younger siblings. The court had scheduled the guardianship transfer hearing for a Tuesday morning in November, giving Sarah exactly 10 days to prepare her children for the possibility that they might be living with a new family by the end of the week. She had tried to explain the situation in terms they could understand, emphasizing that the arrangement was temporary and that she would still be their mother, even if someone else was taking care of their daily needs. The older boys had peppered her with questions she couldn't answer about where they would live, whether they would change schools, and when they might come home. Tommy had surprised her by expressing anger rather than fear about the upcoming hearing, declaring that he was old enough to get a job and help support the family if the courts would just give them more time. His protective instincts had strengthened dramatically since his father's death, and Sarah recognized David's stubborn determination in their oldest son's refusal to accept defeat. She had held him while he cried tears of frustration, assuring him that he was not responsible for solving their adult problems, while privately marveling at the young man he was becoming under such difficult circumstances. Jake had approached the situation with characteristic problem-solving energy, suggesting they could all live in their car if necessary and promising to find more repair work to contribute to their family's income. His optimism and resourcefulness had provided bright spots during their darkest moments, and Sarah knew that whoever took responsibility for their family would quickly discover what a remarkable child he was. His mechanical skills had already impressed several neighbors who had started bringing him small projects, and Sarah suspected he had real potential for a career in engineering if given proper educational opportunities. Danny had retreated further, into himself as the hearing approached, spending even more time at the library and avoiding conversations about their uncertain future. Sarah had found him crying over a book about families the previous evening, and when she asked what was wrong, he had whispered that he was afraid their new guardian wouldn't let him visit the library anymore. His quiet sensitivity made him particularly vulnerable to the emotional turmoil surrounding their situation, and Sarah worried about how he would adapt to major changes in their living arrangements. Ryan had surprised everyone by announcing that he was excited to potentially live somewhere with more space to run and play, viewing the change as an adventure rather than a loss. His resilient optimism had helped maintain family morale during the most difficult moments, and Sarah hoped that whoever assumed responsibility for their care would appreciate his energetic spirit rather than viewing it as a behavioral problem. Ryan's enthusiasm for life had been one of the few constants in their chaotic circumstances. Luke had asked thoughtful questions about the legal process, wanting to understand exactly what would happen and what rights they would maintain as children. In the guardianship arrangement, his intellectual curiosity and need for detailed explanations reflected the same academic inclinations that had made David such a devoted father and patient teacher. Sarah had answered his questions as honestly as possible while trying to protect him from adult concerns that might overwhelm his 6-year-old emotional capacity. Sam had sensed the family's stress without understanding its source, becoming increasingly clingy and asking repeatedly when Daddy would come home to fix their problems. His innocent faith that their father would somehow return to rescue them broke Sarah's heart daily, and she struggled to maintain hope for his sake while privately acknowledging that no miraculous intervention would save them from their current predicament. The morning of the hearing had arrived with unseasonable warmth for November in Colorado, as if nature was mocking their family's frozen emotional state with cheerful sunshine and clear skies. Sarah had dressed the boys in their best clothes, most of which no longer fit properly due to growth spurts she couldn't afford to accommodate with new purchases. She had braided Danny's hair carefully and made sure Sam's dinosaur was clean, understanding that these small details might influence potential guardians' impressions of their family. The drive to the courthouse had been silent, except for Ryan's attempts to lighten the mood with jokes and observations about the scenery they passed. Sarah had parked in the visitor lot and sat for several minutes, gathering courage for what lay ahead, while watching her sons file toward the building that would determine their fate. Tommy had taken Sam's hand without being asked, and Jake had helped Luke tie his shoes, small gestures of sibling care that reminded Sarah of why she was willing to endure this humiliation to keep them together. Inside the courthouse, they had been directed to a waiting room, where other families in crisis sat with their own children, all facing similar impossible choices between inadequate options. Sarah had noticed a few adults sitting alone, presumably potential guardians evaluating the available families, and she had felt sick realizing that these strangers were deciding whether her children might fit their particular needs or preferences. The process felt dehumanizing, reducing their family's complex love and shared history to a simple transaction between parties with vastly unequal power. When their names were finally called, Sarah had led her boys into the courtroom that would witness either their salvation or their separation, unaware that the quiet man sitting in the back row had already made his decision about their family's future. Michael Thompson had been watching them since they entered the building, recognizing something in their dynamic that reminded him of the brothers-in-arms he had served with overseas, the fierce loyalty that bound people together when everything else was stripped away. Michael Thompson sat in the back row of the courtroom, his weathered hands resting on his knees as he observed the Collins family with the same careful attention he had once used to scan Afghan villages for threats. But this time, he wasn't looking for danger. He was seeing himself reflected in the quiet desperation of a mother trying to hold her family together against impossible odds, recognizing the same fierce protectiveness in 14-year-old Tommy's posture that he had witnessed in countless young soldiers who had stepped up when circumstances demanded more than their years should have carried. The prosthetic leg beneath his jeans served as a constant reminder of the day everything changed for him as well, though his transformation had come through shrapnel and gunfire rather than medical bills and eviction notices. 3 years ago, Michael had been leading a convoy through Helmand province when the improvised explosive device detonated beneath their lead vehicle, sending chunks of metal through his left leg and changing the trajectory of his life in ways he was still discovering. The physical rehabilitation had been challenging, but learning to navigate civilian life again had proven far more difficult than mastering the mechanics of his prosthetic. He had returned to Colorado Springs to discover that his wife, Jennifer, had lost her battle with breast cancer while he was deployed, dying alone in a hospital bed while he was unconscious in a military medical facility 8,000 miles away. The house they had shared felt like a mausoleum, filled with reminders of plans they would never execute and dreams that had died with her. Jennifer had wanted children desperately, and they had been trying to start a family when his deployment orders came through. Now he lived in a sprawling ranch house designed for a large family, surrounded by empty bedrooms that echoed with conversations that would never happen. The disability settlement and life insurance money had provided him with resources he had never expected to possess, but wealth without purpose felt meaningless when there was no one to share it with or protect. He had started Thompson Construction partly to give himself structure and partly to create employment opportunities for other veterans who were struggling with their own transitions back to civilian life. The business had grown beyond his expectations, earning contracts throughout the mountain region and establishing him as one of the area's most successful entrepreneurs. But professional success couldn't fill the void left by personal loss. Michael had been drawn to the courthouse that morning by a newspaper article about the guardianship transfer program. Initially curious about the legal mechanisms that allowed families to be restructured through court proceedings, he had no intention of participating in the process, viewing himself as too damaged by his own losses to take responsibility for other people's children. But watching Sarah Collins stand beside her 6 sons, he had felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that their need might provide the purpose his life had been missing. The other potential guardians in the courtroom represented various forms of opportunism that made Michael's jaw clench with familiar anger. Richard Blackstone's reputation preceded him into any room he entered, built on a foundation of exploiting vulnerable people for personal gain. The man owned several businesses that relied heavily on undocumented workers and desperate families, paying minimal wages while demanding maximum loyalty. His interest in the Collins family was transparently predatory, viewing 6 boys as potential unpaid labor for his various enterprises once they reached working age. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore sat with the rigid posture of someone accustomed to having her preferences accommodated without question, her expensive clothing and jewelry marking her as a member of Millbrook County's social elite. Michael had encountered her at various charity functions where wealthy residents gathered to congratulate themselves on their generosity while maintaining careful distance from the people they claimed to help. Her interest in adopting only the youngest Collins boys revealed a disturbing willingness to fracture the family for her own convenience. Several other potential guardians filled the remaining seats, most of them couples seeking to adopt infants or toddlers rather than taking responsibility for an entire family unit. Their presence felt almost insulting to Michael, who understood that separating the Collins boys would destroy the very thing that made them resilient. He had seen enough military families torn apart by deployment and loss to recognize that sibling bonds often provided the only stability available when everything else collapsed. Judge Patricia Hamilton called the proceedings to order with the efficient manner of someone who had presided over countless family tragedies without allowing emotional involvement to compromise her judicial responsibilities. Her voice carried the weight of legal authority as she explained the guardianship transfer process to the assembled participants, outlining the rights and responsibilities that would transfer from Sarah Collins to whichever guardian the court approved. The clinical language transformed human relationships into contractual obligations, reducing love and loyalty to a series of legal requirements. Sarah Collins stood when instructed, her chin raised with determined dignity despite the humiliation of having her maternal competence evaluated by strangers. Michael could see the effort it required for her to maintain composure while publicly acknowledging her inability to provide adequate care for her children. The medical debt that had destroyed her financial stability represented the kind of systemic failure that had frustrated him throughout his military service, situations where good people faced impossible choices because larger systems had failed to protect them. The judge reviewed Sarah's financial situation with dispassionate thoroughness, noting the outstanding medical bills, the bankruptcy filing, and the impending eviction that had triggered the guardianship proceedings. Each detail felt like another small wound to Sarah's dignity, though she answered every question with honest directness that impressed Michael more than any display of false confidence might have. Her willingness to sacrifice her own pride to protect her children's welfare demonstrated the kind of moral courage he had rarely encountered outside combat situations. Tommy Collins had positioned himself slightly in front of his younger brothers, his protective stance unconsciously mirroring the defensive formations Michael had taught young soldiers who were learning to shield their units from enemy fire. The boy's eyes moved constantly between his mother and the assembled adults, evaluating threats with an awareness that should have been unnecessary at his age. Michael recognized the premature maturity that resulted from taking responsibility for others' safety, understanding both its value and its cost. When Judge Hamilton opened the floor for potential guardians to present their proposals, Richard Blackstone stepped forward with the confident manner of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted through financial leverage. His offer included housing for the entire family in exchange for the older boy's labor in his various business operations, presenting the arrangement as an educational opportunity that would teach them valuable work skills. The exploitation inherent in his proposal was thinly disguised behind rhetoric about character building and practical experience. Michael felt his hands clench into fists as Blackstone outlined his expectations for the boys' daily schedules, which included before-school work assignments, weekend labor requirements, and summer employment that would prevent them from participating in normal childhood activities. The man's casual dismissal of educational priorities in favor of immediate economic productivity revealed his true motivations, viewing the children as investments that should generate returns rather than human beings deserving protection and nurturing. Mrs. Whitmore presented her counteroffer with the entitled certainty of someone who expected gratitude for her interest in disrupting the family's unity. She proposed adopting only Sam and Luke, arguing that younger children would adapt more easily to new circumstances, while older boys would be better served by placement in specialized facilities designed for troubled youth. Her characterization of Tommy, Jake, Danny, and Ryan as potentially problematic demonstrated either willful ignorance or deliberate cruelty toward children who had committed no crime beyond being born into unfortunate circumstances. The other potential guardians offered variations on themes of selective adoption or temporary placement, none of them willing to commit to keeping the entire family together, despite the obvious bonds that connected the boys to each other and their mother. Michael listened to each proposal with growing anger, recognizing that these people viewed the Collins family as an opportunity to satisfy their own needs, rather than as human beings deserving respect and consideration. When Judge Hamilton asked if any other potential guardians wished to present proposals, Michael stood slowly, feeling the familiar weight shift required by his prosthetic leg. The courtroom's attention focused on him with curious intensity. Several people clearly recognizing him from local news coverage of his business success and military service. He had not prepared formal remarks, preferring to speak from the heart about what he could offer the Collins family, rather than delivering a practiced presentation designed to impress the court. Michael introduced himself to the judge and explained his background as an Army veteran who had built a successful construction business while recovering from combat injuries. He described his ranch property with its multiple bedrooms, extensive outdoor space, and proximity to excellent schools, emphasizing his ability to provide both financial security and emotional stability for the entire family. His voice carried quiet conviction as he outlined his commitment to keeping all 6 boys together while supporting Sarah's continued involvement in their lives as much as legally permissible. The judge questioned him about his motivations for seeking guardianship of such a large family, particularly given his lack of previous parenting experience. Michael's response revealed the depth of thought he had given to the decision during the brief time since entering the courtroom. He spoke about understanding loss and the importance of family bonds, drawing parallels between military brotherhood and sibling relationships without exploiting his service record for emotional manipulation. His sincerity was evident in every word, contrasting sharply with the calculated presentations that had preceded his remarks. Sarah Collins watched Michael with surprise and cautious hope, clearly unprepared for an offer that addressed all her concerns about keeping her family intact. Her children's reactions ranged from curiosity to skepticism, with Tommy maintaining his protective vigilance, while younger boys began whispering among themselves about the mysterious man who wanted to take care of all of them. Michael made eye contact with each child as he spoke, acknowledging their individual importance rather than treating them as a collective responsibility. The financial aspects of Michael's proposal eliminated any questions about his ability to provide adequate care for the family. His construction business generated substantial income, and his property was mortgage-free thanks to his military benefits and insurance settlements. He offered to assume responsibility for all outstanding medical debts related to David Collins's hospitalization, removing the financial burden that had destroyed Sarah's stability. His willingness to take on such significant financial obligations without seeking any immediate return demonstrated genuine commitment to the family's welfare. More importantly, Michael proposed an arrangement that would allow Sarah to maintain meaningful contact with her children while she worked to rebuild her financial stability. He offered her employment with his construction company in an administrative capacity that would provide steady income and health insurance benefits while allowing flexible scheduling around her children's needs. The proposal represented hope for eventual family reunification rather than permanent separation, addressing Sarah's deepest fears about losing her maternal role entirely. Judge Hamilton reviewed Michael's financial documentation and background check results, finding no impediments to his qualification as a guardian. His military service record, business references, and community standing provided reassurance about his character and reliability. The judge also noted the uniqueness of his proposal in addressing the family's complete needs, rather than selecting only certain children or imposing conditions that would compromise their welfare. The contrast between Michael's offer and the alternatives presented earlier was stark enough to influence even the most skeptical observers in the courtroom. Where others had proposed arrangements that served their own interests while paying lip service to the children's needs, Michael had outlined a comprehensive plan focused entirely on the family's long-term stability and happiness. His willingness to invest his own resources without seeking immediate benefits demonstrated the kind of selfless commitment that made successful guardianship arrangements possible. Sarah found herself struggling with emotions she hadn't expected as she listened to Michael's presentation. The possibility of keeping her family together had seemed impossible just hours earlier. Yet this stranger was offering not just unity, but hope for their collective future. His understanding of their situation appeared genuine rather than patronizing, and his respect for her continued role as their mother addressed fears she hadn't dared voice about being replaced in her children's affections. The boys whispered. Conversations revealed their cautious optimism about Michael's proposal, particularly when he mentioned the ranch's opportunities for outdoor activities and the workshop where Jake could pursue his mechanical interests. Danny perked up noticeably when Michael described the ranch's library and quiet spaces for reading and creative activities. Ryan asked direct questions about sports facilities and recreational opportunities, while Luke inquired about the quality of local schools and educational resources. Even Sam seemed intrigued by Michael's gentle manner and his patient responses to the younger boy's concerns about leaving familiar surroundings. The 4-year-old's acceptance was crucial, since his comfort level would significantly influence the family's overall adjustment to new living arrangements. Michael's natural ease with children suggested positive instincts for parenting, despite his lack of formal experience with family responsibilities. Tommy remained cautious about trusting another adult with his family's welfare, having shouldered protective responsibilities that made him suspicious of promises that seemed too good to be true. His questions for Michael focused on practical concerns about household rules, expectations for the boy's behavior, and consequences for problems that might arise. Michael's responses demonstrated respect for Tommy's protective role while gently indicating that the 14-year-old would be allowed to return to age-appropriate activities rather than continuing to carry adult responsibilities. Judge Hamilton announced a brief recess to allow all parties to consider the proposals presented, giving Sarah an opportunity to speak privately with her children about their preferences regarding potential guardians. The family clustered together in the hallway outside the courtroom, their conversation intense but quiet as they weighed options that would determine their future relationships with each other. Michael respected their need for privacy while remaining available to answer additional questions if the family desired more information about his proposal. The weight of the decision felt enormous to Sarah as she looked at her 6 sons and tried to imagine their lives under each potential arrangement. The prospect of separation that had terrified her for weeks now seemed avoidable, but accepting Michael's guardianship would require trusting a stranger with the most precious aspects of her existence. Her children's opinions would heavily influence her decision, but ultimately she bore responsibility for choices that would affect their development and happiness for years to come. When court reconvened, Judge Hamilton invited Sarah to announce her preference regarding the guardianship proposals. The courtroom fell silent as she stood, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to commit to for herself and her children. Her choice would either tear her family apart or unite them under the protection of a man whose motivations remained largely mysterious despite his apparent sincerity and generous offers. The moment stretched with anticipation as Sarah looked at Michael Thompson, seeing something in his eyes that reminded her of David's quiet strength and unwavering commitment to family welfare. Whatever decision she made would be irrevocable, setting in motion changes that would reshape every aspect of their daily existence. The stranger who had appeared in their darkest hour was offering salvation, but accepting his help would require a leap of faith that terrified and inspired her in equal measure. Sarah's voice carried across the silent courtroom with quiet determination as she announced her decision to accept Michael Thompson's guardianship proposal. The words felt both liberating and terrifying as they left her lips, representing a surrender of control that went against every maternal instinct while simultaneously offering the only path forward that kept her family intact. Judge Hamilton nodded with professional satisfaction as she began the legal formalities that would transfer custody of 6 children to a man Sarah had met less than 2 hours earlier. The paperwork seemed endless as Sarah signed document after document, each signature representing another aspect of her parental authority being transferred to Michael. Her hands trembled slightly as she initialed forms granting him medical decision-making power, educational authority, and legal responsibility for her children's daily welfare. The magnitude of what she was relinquishing hit her in waves, each administrative detail driving home the reality that she was no longer the primary decision-maker in her sons' lives. Michael signed his portions of the documentation with steady focus, understanding that these papers represented more than legal obligations. He was accepting responsibility for 6 individual human beings with their own personalities, needs, fears, and dreams. The weight of that commitment felt heavier than any military mission he had undertaken, because this time the stakes were measured in childhood happiness and family bonds rather than tactical objectives. Tommy watched the proceedings with the intense scrutiny of someone who understood that these signatures were reshaping his world in fundamental ways. His protective instincts remained on high alert as he evaluated this stranger who now held legal authority over his family's future. The 14-year-old had learned not to trust adults' promises after watching his father die, despite doctors' assurances, and seeing his mother's efforts fail, despite her tireless work. Michael's sincerity seemed genuine, but Tommy had developed skepticism beyond his years. Jake approached the situation with characteristic optimism, already asking Michael detailed questions about the workshop facilities at the ranch and whether there would be opportunities to work on mechanical projects. His enthusiasm provided a counterbalance to Tommy's wariness, and Sarah felt grateful that at least one of her children seemed genuinely excited about the changes ahead. Jake's ability to find positive aspects in difficult situations had sustained the family through many dark moments. Danny remained quiet and observant, his artistic sensitivity picking up on emotional undercurrents that his younger brothers might miss. He had positioned himself close to Sarah throughout the proceedings, as if physical proximity might somehow prevent the fundamental changes that were occurring. His withdrawal into himself was a familiar defense mechanism that appeared whenever his sense of security was threatened, and Sarah worried about how he would adapt to living with someone new. Ryan bounced with barely contained energy as the legal formalities dragged on, his natural enthusiasm for new experiences overriding any anxiety about leaving familiar surroundings. He peppered Michael with questions about outdoor activities available at the ranch, sports equipment, and whether there were animals he could help care for. His resilient optimism had carried the family through many difficulties, and Sarah hoped it would serve him well during this transition. Luke listened carefully to every exchange between the adults, his intellectual curiosity engaged by the legal language and procedural requirements he was witnessing. He asked thoughtful questions about how long the guardianship arrangement would last and whether he would still be able to see his mother regularly. His need for detailed understanding reflected the same analytical mind that had made him such an exceptional student despite their family's upheavals. Sam clung to his stuffed dinosaur while staying close to Sarah, too young to fully comprehend the proceedings, but old enough to sense that significant changes were occurring. His innocent questions about when they would go home and whether Michael would read him bedtime stories revealed his unconscious acceptance of the new arrangement. The 4-year-old's adaptability would likely make his transition easier than his older brother's adjustments. When the legal paperwork was finally complete, Judge Hamilton addressed the newly formed family unit with formal congratulations and practical advice about the transition period ahead. She emphasized that the guardianship arrangement included provisions for regular review and modification if circumstances changed, offering some reassurance to Sarah that the decision wasn't entirely irreversible. The judge also provided contact information for family counseling services that specialized in helping blended families navigate complex emotional adjustments. Michael approached Sarah after the court session concluded, his manner respectful and understanding as he acknowledged the difficulty of what she had just experienced. He proposed that they spend the remainder of the day together so the boys could become more familiar with him before the actual transition occurred. His suggestion demonstrated sensitivity to the family's emotional needs rather than rushing to assert his new legal authority, and Sarah felt grateful for his consideration. The group migrated to the old Mill Diner, Millbrook County's central gathering place where community members had shared meals and conversations for over 50 years. The familiar environment provided some comfort for the boys as they navigated their first extended interaction with their new guardian. Michael chose a large corner booth that could accommodate the entire family, understanding instinctively that maintaining their physical unity was important during this initial period. Over lunch, Michael shared more details about his ranch and the life he was offering the Collins family. He described the main house with its 6 bedrooms, each large enough for the boys to have personal space while maintaining the close relationships that had sustained them through recent difficulties. The property included a workshop where Jake could pursue his mechanical interests, quiet indoor spaces where Danny and Luke could read and create, and extensive outdoor areas where Ryan could engage in the physical activities he craved. Sarah found herself cautiously optimistic as she listened to Michael's descriptions of the educational opportunities available in their rural school district. The teachers maintained smaller class sizes that would allow for more individualized attention, and the community's strong agricultural heritage meant that practical skills were valued alongside academic achievement. Michael's commitment to supporting all 6 boys' educational goals, from Tommy's potential college aspirations to Sam's developmental needs, demonstrated genuine understanding of their individual requirements. The conversation revealed Michael's thoughtful approach to parenting, despite his lack of formal experience with children. He had researched child development resources and consulted with family counselors about the specific challenges faced by children who had experienced trauma and instability. His willingness to seek professional guidance rather than relying solely on his own instincts impressed Sarah and suggested that he understood the complexity of the responsibility he was accepting. Michael also discussed his expectations for the boys' behavior and household responsibilities, presenting reasonable guidelines that balanced structure with flexibility. He emphasized that his primary goal was creating a stable environment where they could heal from recent trauma while developing the skills and confidence necessary for successful adult lives. His approach seemed focused on nurturing rather than controlling, which aligned with Sarah's own parenting philosophy. The financial arrangements Michael proposed eliminated Sarah's most pressing concerns about her family's basic needs. His offer to pay off the medical debt that had destroyed their stability removed the constant stress of collection calls and legal threats that had dominated their lives for months. More importantly, his employment offer provided Sarah with a path toward rebuilding her independence while maintaining close contact with her children. As the afternoon progressed, the boys gradually warmed to Michael's presence, particularly when he demonstrated genuine interest in their individual personalities and concerns. He listened patiently to Jake's detailed explanations of various mechanical projects, encouraged Danny's artistic observations about the diner's architecture, and engaged Luke in discussions about books they had both read. His interactions with each child felt natural rather than forced, suggesting an intuitive understanding of how to connect with young people. Tommy remained the most reserved member of the family, though Sarah noticed him beginning to relax slightly as Michael consistently deferred to his protective role rather than challenging it. The older boy's questions became less confrontational and more genuinely curious as he began to believe that Michael's intentions were sincere. Tommy's eventual acceptance would be crucial for the family's successful adjustment, given his influence over his younger brother's attitudes. The practical arrangements for the transition were discussed with careful attention to the boys' emotional needs and preferences. Michael suggested that they spend the following day visiting the ranch so the children could see their new home and begin the psychological adjustment to leaving their current environment. He offered to help with packing their belongings and coordinating the physical move in whatever way would be least disruptive for the family. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and loss as the reality of the arrangement settled in her mind. The immediate crisis that had threatened to separate her family was resolved, but she was also acknowledging that her role as primary caregiver was ending. Michael's respectful treatment of her continued importance in the boys' lives helped ease some of her fears about being replaced. But the fundamental shift in family dynamics would require significant emotional adjustment for everyone involved. The boys' reactions to the upcoming changes varied according to their personalities and ages. Ryan expressed excitement about exploring the ranch and meeting any animals that might live there, while Luke wanted detailed information about the local library and school curriculum. Danny asked quietly whether he would be able to bring his art supplies and continue drawing, receiving immediate reassurance from Michael about supporting his creative interests. Sam's primary concern was whether his dinosaur would be welcome in his new bedroom, a question that made Michael smile with genuine warmth. As evening approached, the time came for the family to return to their apartment for one final night together. Before the transition began, Michael provided them with his contact information and assured them that he would be available at any time if questions or concerns arose during the night. His understanding that this would be an emotionally difficult period for everyone demonstrated the kind of sensitivity that gave Sarah hope about her decision. The drive back to their cramped apartment felt surreal after spending the day discussing their future at a spacious ranch with a man who seemed committed to their collective welfare. Sarah helped the boys begin the overwhelming task of deciding what belongings to pack for their new life, understanding that these choices represented more than practical considerations. Each item they selected or left behind symbolized their hopes and fears about the changes ahead. Tommy took responsibility for helping his younger brothers organize their possessions, his natural leadership abilities emerging as he guided discussions about what they would need immediately versus what could be retrieved later. His acceptance of the transition seemed to grow stronger as he focused on practical tasks rather than dwelling on the emotional implications of leaving their familiar environment. Jake gathered his collection of tools and mechanical parts with obvious excitement about accessing Michael's workshop facilities. His enthusiasm was infectious, helping to maintain positive family morale as they prepared for the dramatic changes ahead. Jake's optimism had always been a source of strength for his brothers, and his genuine excitement about their new situation provided reassurance that the decision might indeed lead to better circumstances. Danny carefully packed his art supplies, and the few drawings he was willing to share, his quiet preparation reflecting both hope and apprehension about maintaining his creative outlet in an unfamiliar environment. His sensitivity to change required gentle handling, and Sarah felt grateful that Michael had already demonstrated understanding of his artistic nature. Danny's adjustment would likely take longer than his brother's, but his resilience had been tested before. Ryan approached packing with characteristic energy, selecting favorite toys and sports equipment while chattering excitedly about potential adventures at the ranch. His natural enthusiasm for new experiences was serving the family well during this transition, providing a counterbalance to more anxious responses from other family members. Ryan's adaptability had always been remarkable, and Sarah expected him to thrive in the more spacious environment Michael was offering. Luke methodically organized his books and educational materials, asking practical questions about study spaces and homework expectations at their new home. His intellectual curiosity was already engaged by the possibilities that lay ahead, and his analytical approach to the changes was helping him process the emotional aspects of leaving familiar surroundings. Luke's academic interests aligned well with Michael's commitment to supporting educational goals. Sam's packing consisted primarily of ensuring that his stuffed dinosaur and favorite blanket would accompany him to the new house, his 4-year-old. Priorities focused on maintaining security objects rather than worrying about complex emotional adjustments. His innocent acceptance of the changes provided a reminder that resilience could take many forms, and his trusting nature would likely facilitate the quickest adjustment to their new circumstances. As the family settled down for their final night, in the apartment that had housed them during some of their most difficult months, Sarah reflected on the extraordinary day that had transformed their prospects from desperate to hopeful. The legal guardianship arrangement represented a dramatic shift in their family structure, but it also offered possibilities she had thought were permanently lost. Michael Thompson had appeared like an unexpected answer to prayers she had been afraid to voice, providing not just financial security, but genuine commitment to keeping her family together. The boys' whispered conversations from their shared sleeping areas revealed mixtures of excitement and apprehension about the changes ahead, normal responses to such significant transitions. Sarah listened to their quiet discussions about what their new life might include, feeling grateful that their primary concerns focused on practical matters rather than fears about separation or abandonment. Michael's comprehensive approach to their family's needs had addressed their most fundamental worries about staying together. Sleep came fitfully for Sarah as she processed the day's emotional upheavals and prepared mentally for the transition that would begin the following morning. The responsibility of ensuring her children's successful adjustment to their new circumstances felt overwhelming, even though she would no longer bear that burden alone. Michael's partnership in caring for her boys represented both relief and challenge as she learned to share decisions that had been hers alone since David's death. The dawn of their new life approached with a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty that characterized all significant changes in family circumstances. Sarah had made the best decision available under impossible circumstances, but the ultimate success of the arrangement would depend on factors beyond her control. The stranger who had rescued them from separation might prove to be everything he appeared to be, or the reality of daily life together might reveal complications that courtroom appearances had concealed. The Thompson Ranch sprawled across the Colorado landscape like something from a dream that the Collins family had never dared to imagine for themselves. As Michael's pickup truck crested the hill that overlooked his property, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat at the sight of the sprawling main house nestled among towering pine trees, with the Rocky Mountains creating a majestic backdrop that seemed to stretch endlessly into the clear blue sky. The boys pressed their faces against the windows in stunned silence, their previous excitement giving way to awe at the sheer scale of what would now be their home. The main house stood 2 stories tall, with a wraparound porch that promised countless evenings watching sunsets paint the sky in brilliant colors. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, while a massive stone chimney suggested cozy winter nights by a crackling fireplace. The architecture blended rustic mountain charm with modern functionality, creating an atmosphere that was both impressive and welcoming. Sarah could see herself sitting on that porch with a cup of coffee, watching her boys play in the vast yard while feeling secure for the first time in years. Michael pulled into the circular driveway and turned off the engine, allowing the family a moment to absorb their new surroundings before beginning the tour that would familiarize them with spaces they would soon call home. The silence stretched comfortably as each person processed their own emotions about the transition from cramped apartment living to this expansive property. Even Tommy, who had maintained his protective skepticism throughout the journey, seemed impressed by the obvious care and resources that had gone into creating such a beautiful environment. Rosa Martinez emerged from the front door with a warm smile that immediately put the nervous children at ease. Michael's housekeeper had worked for him since he purchased the ranch, initially hired to help him manage basic domestic tasks while he recovered from his injuries and learned to navigate civilian life again. Over the years, she had become something closer to family, providing the kind of nurturing presence that his empty house had desperately needed. Her own children had grown up and moved away, leaving her with abundant maternal instincts and no one to spoil. Rosa had spent the previous day preparing the house for its new occupants, ensuring that each bedroom was perfectly arranged to welcome a specific child. She had researched age-appropriate decorations and activities, stocking each room with books, games, and personal touches that would help the boys feel immediately at home. Her excitement about having children in the house again was evident in every carefully planned detail, from the fresh flowers in each room to the homemade cookies cooling in the kitchen. The tour began with the main living areas, where comfortable furniture was arranged to encourage family gatherings while providing quiet corners for individual activities. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the rooms with natural light and offered spectacular views of the surrounding mountains and forests. The kitchen was spacious enough to accommodate large family meals, with an island that could serve as homework central and gathering place for casual conversations. Sarah could already envision her boys clustered around that island, sharing stories about their days, while Rosa prepared meals that would become cherished family memories. Michael led them upstairs to the bedrooms that would become each boy's private sanctuary. Tommy's room was the largest, acknowledging his status as the oldest and his need for space to store the sports equipment and personal items that marked his transition toward adulthood. The room included a desk suitable for homework and college preparation, along with built-in shelving that could accommodate his growing collection of books and personal mementos. A large window overlooked the front yard, allowing him to maintain his protective watch over his younger brothers while giving him the privacy appropriate for a teenager. Jake's room was positioned near the window that offered the best view of Michael's workshop, and the walls were decorated with vintage automotive posters and mechanical drawings that spoke to his passionate interest in how things worked. A workbench had been installed beneath the window, complete with basic tools and supplies that would allow him to pursue small projects in his personal space. The message was clear that his mechanical aptitude was valued and encouraged, rather than merely tolerated. Danny's room was painted in soft, calming colors that would provide the peaceful environment his sensitive nature required. An easel stood, ready for art projects, while shelving displayed carefully selected books about famous artists and creative techniques. Natural light streamed through sheer curtains, creating the kind of inspiring atmosphere where artistic creativity could flourish. A comfortable reading chair was positioned near the window, offering a quiet retreat when the outside world became overwhelming. Ryan's room reflected his energetic personality with bright colors and plenty of open floor space for active play. Sports equipment was neatly organized in custom storage solutions, while posters of famous athletes decorated the walls. A small basketball hoop was mounted on one wall, providing an outlet for his boundless energy even during bad weather. The room's design acknowledged that physical activity was essential to Ryan's happiness and well-being. Luke's room was arranged like a miniature library, with extensive shelving for his growing collection of books and educational materials. A comfortable desk was positioned to take advantage of the best natural light for reading and studying, while a cozy armchair created a perfect spot for losing himself in fascinating stories. Educational posters and maps decorated the walls, reflecting his intellectual curiosity and love of learning about the world beyond his immediate experience. Sam's room was designed with the needs of a 4-year-old in mind, featuring bright colors, soft textures, and plenty of storage for toys and games. A small bookshelf held picture books at his eye level, while a play area was equipped with age-appropriate toys that would encourage both independent play and creative development. The room was positioned closest to the master suite, ensuring that Michael would be nearby if nightmares or other childhood fears disrupted Sam's sleep. The boys' reactions to their individual rooms varied according to their personalities, but the common thread was amazement that someone had put such thought into understanding their specific needs and interests. Each room represented not just shelter, but recognition of their individual worth and potential. Michael's investment in creating personalized spaces demonstrated a level of commitment that went far beyond meeting basic legal obligations as their guardian. Sarah found herself fighting back tears as she witnessed her children's wonder at having their own bedrooms for the first time in months. The cramped apartment had required them to share sleeping spaces, sacrificing privacy and personal expression. To the demands of their reduced circumstances, now each boy had a sanctuary that was entirely his own, a place where he could retreat when family life became overwhelming and express his personality through decorations and arrangements. The house tour continued with the basement recreation area, where comfortable seating was arranged around a large television for family movie nights. Game tables provided spaces for board games and puzzles, while a corner was set up with age-appropriate exercise equipment for rainy day activity. The space was designed to bring the family together for fun and relaxation, creating opportunities for bonding that their previous living situations had made difficult. Michael's home office occupied one corner of the main floor, but he made it clear that the boys were welcome to use the computer for homework and research projects under appropriate supervision. His desk was equipped with the kind of technology that would support their educational goals, while filing cabinets contained resources about child development and family dynamics that revealed his serious commitment to being an effective guardian. The workshop that had captured Jake's imagination from their first meeting exceeded even his optimistic expectations. Professional-grade tools were organized with military precision, while workbenches provided ample space for complex projects. Michael explained his policy of allowing supervised access to appropriate equipment, emphasizing safety training and responsible use rather than blanket restrictions that might stifle Jake's mechanical curiosity. Outside, the property offered endless opportunities for exploration and outdoor activities that had been impossible in their urban apartment setting. A large lawn provided space for games and sports, while hiking trails wound through the surrounding forest. A small pond reflected the mountains and sky while supporting fish and wildlife that would provide education and entertainment. The boys could already imagine summer days spent fishing, swimming, and exploring their new territory. The barn housed 3 horses that Michael kept primarily for his own enjoyment, but was willing to share with family members who showed interest in learning to ride. The animals were gentle and well-trained, suitable for children to interact with, under proper supervision. For boys who had never lived around large animals, the horses represented adventure and responsibility in equal measure. Rosa had prepared a welcome lunch that showcased both her culinary skills and her understanding of children's preferences. The meal balanced familiar comfort foods with new flavors that would gradually expand the boys' palates, while the presentation demonstrated the kind of care and attention they could expect in their daily lives. The dining room table was large enough to accommodate the entire family, with room for future growth, symbolizing the permanence and stability that Michael was offering. During lunch, Michael outlined the household routines and expectations that would provide structure for their new life together. His approach balanced necessary discipline with flexibility, recognizing that each child would need time to adjust to new surroundings and relationships. Chores were assigned according to age and ability, with opportunities for the boys to earn additional privileges through responsible behavior and helpful attitudes. Educational priorities were discussed with attention to each child's individual needs and interests. Michael had already contacted the local school district to arrange transfers and ensure that any special requirements would be accommodated. His commitment to supporting their academic success included tutoring resources, educational trips, and encouragement for extracurricular activities that would develop their talents and interests. The conversation revealed Michael's thoughtful approach to discipline and behavior management, emphasizing natural consequences and logical problem-solving rather than arbitrary punishment. His military background provided structure and clear expectations, while his personal experience with trauma informed his understanding of how stress could affect children's behavior and emotional regulation. Sarah found herself genuinely impressed by the comprehensive nature of Michael's preparation for their arrival. He had clearly invested significant time and resources in creating an environment where her boys could thrive, while his plans for their education and development demonstrated long-term thinking about their futures. His willingness to maintain her involvement in major decisions showed respect for her continued role as their mother. The afternoon was spent exploring the property and beginning the process of settling into their new routines. Each boy gravitated toward the activities and spaces that matched his interests, with Jake immediately drawn to the workshop, Danny discovering a quiet corner perfect for reading, and Ryan testing the possibilities for outdoor games. The natural way they began to spread out and claim territory suggested that the adjustment period might be smoother than anyone had dared to hope. Tommy gradually relaxed his protective vigilance as he observed his brother's positive responses to their new environment. His questions for Michael became more collaborative and less interrogational as he began to believe that this stranger genuinely cared about their family's welfare. The teenager's acceptance was crucial for maintaining family unity during the transition period. As evening approached, the family gathered for their first dinner in the ranch house dining room. Rosa had prepared a feast that celebrated their arrival while introducing them to some of Michael's favorite dishes. The conversation flowed more naturally than it had during their cautious interactions at the courthouse and diner, suggesting that the magnificent setting and obvious preparation were helping everyone relax into their new roles. Sarah watched her boys interact with Michael over dinner, noting how he included each child in conversations while respecting their different communication styles. His patient attention to Sam's chatter about dinosaurs was as genuine as his interest in Tommy's questions about local high school opportunities. The veteran's natural ease with children suggested that his lack of parenting experience might not be the obstacle she had initially feared. The bedtime routine in their new home was an adventure in itself, with each boy excited to sleep in his own room for the first time in months. Michael and Rosa had stocked each bathroom with personal care items, while soft pajamas and comfortable bedding promised peaceful sleep. The house seemed to embrace them with warmth and security that had been missing from their lives since David's death. Sarah tucked each boy into his new bed, marveling at how quickly they had adapted to circumstances that had seemed impossible just days earlier. Their excitement about tomorrow's adventures was tempered by the comfortable tiredness that comes from a day filled with positive discoveries. The sounds of the mountain night outside their windows were different from city noises, but the peace they promised was exactly what her traumatized family needed. Michael found Sarah on the front porch after all the boys had settled down for the night, understanding that she needed a few minutes to process the emotional complexity of watching her children begin new lives under his protection. The conversation that followed was gentle and reassuring, with Michael acknowledging the difficulty of her position while expressing genuine gratitude for her trust in his ability to care for her most precious possessions. The stars over the Colorado mountains seemed brighter than any Sarah had ever seen, perhaps because they were shining down on the first night in years when she could sleep without worrying about her family's basic safety and security. The stranger, who had rescued them from separation, had already proven his sincerity through actions rather than words, creating an environment where healing and growth could begin for all of them. 3 months into their new life at the Thompson Ranch, the transformation in the Collins family was remarkable enough to attract attention from social workers, school officials, and community members who had observed their integration into mountain life. Sarah had moved into the small cottage on the property that Michael had renovated specifically for her use, providing her with privacy and independence while keeping her close enough to maintain daily contact with her children. Her work with Thompson Construction had evolved into a management role that utilized her organizational skills while offering flexibility around her family's needs. Tommy had blossomed in the high school environment that valued both academic achievement and practical skills, earning a position on the varsity basketball team while maintaining grades that suggested college would indeed be possible. His relationship with Michael had developed into genuine respect and affection, with the teenager finally allowing another adult male into his inner circle of trust. The protective instincts that had served his family well during their crisis were gradually giving way to normal adolescent concerns about sports, friends, and future plans. Jake's mechanical aptitude had found perfect expression in Michael's workshop, where he spent hours learning advanced techniques while helping with construction company projects that required precision and creativity. His natural talent had impressed Michael's employees, several of whom had begun mentoring him in specialized skills that could lead to lucrative career opportunities. The 12-year-old's confidence had grown dramatically as adults recognized and valued his unusual abilities. Danny's artistic development had flourished in the peaceful environment that allowed his creativity to emerge without the stress and chaos that had previously suppressed his talents. His drawings and paintings now decorated the ranch house walls, while his participation in school art programs had earned recognition that boosted his self-esteem. The quiet child had begun to share his work proudly rather than hiding it from potential criticism. Ryan's boundless energy had found healthy outlets through sports activities, horseback riding, and outdoor adventures that channeled his enthusiasm into productive pursuits. His grades had improved dramatically in the smaller classroom environment, while his natural leadership abilities were emerging through youth group activities and team sports. The athletic child was developing discipline and focus that complemented his innate enthusiasm. Luke's intellectual curiosity had exploded in an environment that provided unlimited books, educational resources, and adult conversation partners who appreciated his advanced thinking. His reading level had jumped significantly, while his questions about science and history demonstrated the kind of academic potential that excited his teachers. The thoughtful child was developing confidence in expressing his ideas and pursuing complex topics. Sam's adjustment to ranch life had been seamless, with the 4-year-old thriving in the stable, nurturing environment that allowed his personality to shine. His vocabulary had expanded dramatically through constant interaction with caring adults, while his social skills were developing through preschool activities and community events. The youngest Collins boy was growing into a happy, confident child who felt secure in his place within the family structure. The legal challenges that social worker Janet Meyer had initially predicted never materialized, largely because the success of the arrangement was evident to everyone who observed the family's interactions. The boy's academic performance, emotional stability, and obvious happiness provided clear evidence that Michael's guardianship was serving their best interests. Even the most skeptical officials had to acknowledge that unconventional solutions sometimes produced superior results. Michael's own transformation was equally remarkable, as the isolated veteran had discovered that caring for 6 children had filled the void left by his personal losses while giving him purpose beyond his business success. His PTSD symptoms had decreased significantly as family responsibilities provided positive structure and meaningful goals. The empty ranch house had become a home filled with laughter, conversation, and the comfortable chaos that comes with a large, active family. The community's response to the unusual family arrangement had evolved from initial curiosity to genuine admiration for what they had accomplished together. Local businesses had rallied to support Thompson Construction, appreciating Michael's commitment to employing veterans and providing opportunities for local youth. The family's success story had become a source of pride for Millbrook County, demonstrating that creative solutions could address complex social problems. Sarah's relationship with Michael had deepened into something neither of them had expected when they first met in the courthouse. Their shared commitment to the boy's welfare had created a foundation of trust and respect that was gradually evolving into romantic feelings neither was quite ready to acknowledge publicly. The careful boundaries they maintained were beginning to blur as their partnership in parenting revealed deeper compatibility and mutual attraction. The seasonal cycle of ranch life had provided natural opportunities for the family to bond through shared work and celebrations. Summer had brought camping trips and fishing expeditions that created cherished memories, while autumn offered harvest activities and preparations for the boys' return to school. Winter promised skiing lessons and cozy evenings by the fireplace, while spring would bring new projects and continued growth for everyone involved. The medical debt that had destroyed Sarah's financial stability was now just a memory, paid off by Michael without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. Her credit had been restored, her nursing license had been renewed, and her confidence as a professional and mother had returned stronger than before. The desperate woman who had stood in the courthouse fearing separation from her children had been replaced by someone who could envision a future filled with possibilities rather than limitations. Financial security had removed the constant stress that had dominated the family's daily existence, allowing everyone to focus on education, relationships, and personal development instead of mere survival. The boys' clothing fit properly, their school supplies were adequate, and their extracurricular activities were limited only by time and interest rather than cost. The transformation from poverty to prosperity had been dramatic, but more importantly, it had been accompanied by emotional healing that money alone could never have purchased. The educational opportunities available to the boys in their new environment exceeded anything they could have accessed in their previous circumstances. Private tutoring supplemented excellent public education, while cultural trips and educational travel broadened their perspectives beyond the rural mountain community. Michael's commitment to their intellectual development was preparing them for futures that would have been impossible to imagine during their darkest days. Christmas morning at the Thompson Ranch brought emotions that overwhelmed everyone who witnessed the joy of 6 children discovering that Santa Claus had indeed found their new address. The mountain of presents under the enormous tree represented more than material abundance. They symbolized love, security, and the promise that good things could happen to families who had learned to hope again, despite experiencing devastating losses. The holiday celebration included extended family, as Rosa's children and grandchildren joined the festivities, creating the kind of multi-generational gathering that provided the boys with additional adult relationships and peer connections. House filled with laughter, music, and the comfortable noise of people who genuinely enjoyed being together, fulfilling the vision Michael had held for his property since purchasing it years earlier. New Year's Eve brought reflection on the incredible journey that had transformed 7 individual lives into a thriving family unit. The countdown to midnight occurred on the front porch, where Sarah and Michael stood watching their boys play in the snow while contemplating the changes that a single year had brought to all of them. The scared, desperate people who had met in a courthouse had been replaced by confident individuals who had learned that love could indeed conquer circumstances that had seemed impossible to overcome. The success of their unconventional arrangement had attracted attention from family services organizations throughout Colorado, with Michael and Sarah frequently asked to share their story at conferences and training sessions. Their willingness to speak publicly about the guardianship process had helped other families explore alternative solutions to crisis situations, while their example had encouraged policy discussions about improving support systems for families facing similar challenges. 2 years after the courthouse hearing that had changed everything, Michael Thompson stood before another judge in the same Millbrook County building, but this time the proceedings were celebratory rather than desperate. Sarah Collins, now Sarah Thompson, stood beside him in a white dress, while 6 boys watched their mother marry the man who had rescued their family and taught them that sometimes heroes appear in the most unexpected forms. The wedding ceremony was attended by the entire community that had witnessed their remarkable journey, from strangers thrown together by circumstance to a genuine family bound by love, respect, and shared commitment to each other's welfare. Judge Patricia Hamilton, who had presided over the original guardianship hearing, performed the ceremony with obvious pleasure at witnessing such a positive outcome to what had begun as a family crisis. Tommy served as Michael's best man, symbolizing the deep trust and affection that had developed between the teenager and the veteran who had stepped up when leadership was needed. The other boys served as ushers and ring bearers, their pride in their family's happiness evident in their broad smiles and careful attention to their ceremonial duties. Rosa wept tears of joy as she watched the house she had helped prepare for. Children finally become the true family home she had always known it could be. The reception celebrated not just a wedding, but the completion of a family circle that had been broken by tragedy and reassembled through courage, generosity, and the willingness of strangers to believe in possibilities that others had dismissed as impossible. The veteran who had purchased a broken woman and her 6 sons at auction had discovered that rescue was a mutual act, saving himself as surely as he had saved them from separation and despair. As the evening wound down and the guests departed for their own homes, the newly married couple stood on their front porch, watching their children play in the yard that stretched toward mountains silhouetted against a star-filled sky. The journey from that desperate courthouse morning to this moment of complete happiness had been filled with challenges, growth, and discoveries about the power of love to transform even the most difficult circumstances into something beautiful and lasting. The story that had begun with a mother's desperate choice to surrender legal custody of her children rather than see them separated had evolved into a testament to the possibility that sometimes the most unconventional solutions produce the most extraordinary results. The veteran, who had volunteered to take responsibility for 7 strangers, had learned that family bonds could be created through choice and commitment as surely as through biology, while the woman who had trusted him with her most precious possessions had discovered that love could indeed appear when least expected and most needed. Sarah Thompson fell asleep that night, surrounded by the sounds of her husband's gentle breathing and her children's distant laughter as they settled into their rooms, secure in the knowledge that their family's story would continue to unfold. In an environment where growth, love, and happiness were not just possibilities, but daily realities. The broken woman from the courthouse had been healed by the same love that had filled the empty spaces in a lonely veteran's heart, proving that sometimes the most beautiful families are those that choose each other, rather than those that simply happen by accident of birth. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Thompson ranch as Sarah stepped onto the front porch, coffee mug in hand, watching her husband Michael guide their youngest son Sam through his first horseback riding lesson. 5 years had passed since that terrifying day in the Millbrook County Courthouse, and the woman who had once stood trembling before a judge, fearing the separation of her family, now observed a scene that embodied everything she had never dared to dream possible during those dark months of desperation. Sam, now 9 years old, sat confidently atop Buttercup, the gentlest mare in Michael's small herd, his gap-toothed grin stretching from ear to ear as he successfully guided the horse through the basic maneuvers his stepfather had been teaching. Him, the 4-year-old who had once clutched a tattered dinosaur while his world crumbled around him, had grown into a confident child who approached new challenges with enthusiasm rather than fear. His transformation reflected the security and love that had surrounded him since that pivotal day when a stranger had chosen to rescue their family from the brink of destruction. In the distance, Sarah could see Tommy, now 19 and home from Colorado State University for spring break, working alongside Jake in Michael's expanded workshop. The older boy had graduated high school as valedictorian, earning a full scholarship to study engineering, his academic success built on the foundation of stability that Michael's guardianship had provided. The protective 14-year-old, who had once carried the weight of his family's survival on his narrow shoulders, had blossomed into a young man who understood that strength sometimes meant accepting help rather than bearing burdens alone. Jake, at 17, had developed into a master craftsman whose mechanical innovations had earned recognition throughout the region. His designs for specialized farming equipment had attracted attention from agricultural companies, and several universities were competing to offer him scholarships that would allow him to pursue mechanical engineering while continuing his inventive work. The 12-year-old who had once tinkered with broken appliances in desperate hope of earning a few dollars had discovered that his talents could open doors to opportunities he had never imagined existed. Danny emerged from the house carrying his latest painting, a landscape that captured the morning light streaming across the mountain meadows with the kind of artistic maturity that had earned him acceptance to the prestigious Colorado Institute of Art. At 15, his sensitivity had transformed from a vulnerability into a gift that allowed him to create beauty from the raw materials of emotion and observation. The quiet child, who had once stopped drawing because reality felt too painful, had learned that art could heal wounds while celebrating the magnificent possibilities life could offer. Ryan burst through the front door with his characteristic energy, now channeled into productive pursuits that had made him a star athlete at Millbrook High School. His achievements on the football field and track had attracted attention from college scouts, while his natural leadership abilities had earned him election as student body president. The 8-year-old whose enthusiasm had sustained his family through their darkest hours had grown into a young man who inspired others through his example of determination and optimism. Luke appeared behind his brother, carrying an armload of books from the extensive library that Michael had continued expanding to feed the intellectual appetite that had first emerged during their library visits in their previous life. Now 13, his academic achievements had earned him placement in advanced courses that challenged his brilliant mind while preparing him for the kind of scholarly pursuits that excited his teachers and impressed his parents. The 6-year-old, who had once found refuge in stories, had learned that knowledge could be a tool for building better realities rather than merely escaping difficult ones. The transformation of the Collins boys into confident, accomplished young men represented only part of the miracle that had unfolded at the Thompson Ranch. Sarah herself had evolved from the desperate woman who had voluntarily surrendered custody of her children to a successful businesswoman who co-managed Thompson Construction's operations while maintaining her nursing license for volunteer work at the local clinic. Her marriage to Michael 3 years earlier had been the culmination of a love story that had begun with legal documents and grown into the kind of partnership that inspired everyone who witnessed their devotion to each other and their family. Michael's own journey from isolated veteran to beloved family patriarch had been equally remarkable, as caring for 6 children had healed wounds that military medicine had been unable to address. His PTSD episodes had virtually disappeared as family responsibilities provided positive structure and meaningful purpose, while his prosthetic leg had become simply another tool he used to accomplish the work of building a life filled with love and laughter. The man who had once lived alone in a house designed for a family had discovered that homes were created by the people who filled them with affection rather than by the structures that contained them. The ranch itself had evolved into something beyond a successful agricultural operation, becoming a model for therapeutic farming that attracted visitors from across the country who wanted to understand how rural environments could heal trauma. While building resilience, Michael and Sarah had established a non-profit foundation that provided temporary housing and employment opportunities for military families facing crisis situations, using their own experience as proof that unconventional solutions could address complex problems when approached with creativity and compassion. Their success story had attracted national attention, with feature articles in major magazines and invitations to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to family preservation and veteran integration. The couple had testified before congressional committees about the need for flexible policies that could accommodate non-traditional family structures while maintaining focus on children's welfare rather than bureaucratic convenience. Their advocacy had contributed to policy changes that made guardianship transfers more accessible to families facing similar crises. The local community had embraced the Thompson family as living proof that Millbrook County's values of mutual support and creative problem-solving could produce extraordinary results when applied to human challenges. The ranch had become a gathering place for community events, from harvest festivals that brought together families from across the region to educational programs that taught sustainable farming techniques to urban visitors. The property that had once housed a lonely veteran had transformed into a hub of activity that enriched the entire community. The 6 boys had become local celebrities in their own right, each earning recognition for achievements that reflected both individual talents and the nurturing environment that had allowed those gifts to flourish. Tommy's academic success had inspired other first-generation college students, while Jake's mechanical innovations had been featured in regional technology competitions. Danny's artwork decorated public buildings throughout the county, while Brian's athletic achievements had brought positive attention to their small high school's programs. Luke's intellectual accomplishments had earned him invitations to participate in statewide academic competitions, while Sam's natural charm and storytelling ability had made him a favorite speaker at elementary school career days, where he shared stories about ranch life and the importance of families that choose each other. Each boy's individual success reflected the collective triumph of a family that had refused to be destroyed by circumstances beyond their control. The cottage where Sarah had initially lived had been converted into guest quarters for the steady stream of visitors who came to learn about the ranch's innovative programs. Social workers, policymakers, and other families facing crisis situations were regularly hosted at the property, where they could observe firsthand how creative approaches to family preservation could succeed when supported by adequate resources and genuine commitment. The guest quarters had become a laboratory for testing new ideas about therapeutic environments and family healing. Rosa Martinez, now in her 70s, continued to serve as the ranch's domestic manager while acting as grandmother figure to the boys who had never known their biological grandparents. Her wisdom and nurturing presence had been crucial to the family's successful integration, providing the kind of multi-generational perspective that helped bridge the gap between Michael's military background and the boys' needs for maternal guidance. Her own grandchildren regularly visited the ranch, creating an extended family network that enriched everyone's experience. The horses that had initially served as Michael's personal hobby had evolved into a therapeutic riding program that served children throughout the region who were dealing with various forms of trauma. The gentle animals had proven remarkably effective at building confidence and emotional regulation skills in young people who had experienced loss, abuse, or family disruption. The program had earned recognition from state authorities and attracted funding that allowed it to serve increasing numbers of children who needed healing that traditional therapy alone couldn't provide. The workshop, where Jake had first discovered his mechanical genius, had expanded into a full-scale manufacturing facility that produced custom farming equipment, while providing employment for local residents and training opportunities for young people interested in skilled trades. The business had grown beyond anyone's expectations, earning contracts with agricultural operations throughout the mountain region while maintaining focus on quality craftsmanship and innovative design. Jake's contributions to the operation had evolved from enthusiastic assistance to genuine partnership as his skills matured. The educational opportunities that had initially attracted Sarah to Michael's guardianship proposal had exceeded every expectation as the boys thrived in an environment that valued both academic achievement and practical skills. The local school district had benefited from the family's presence, as Michael's construction company had donated materials and labor for building improvements, while Sarah's nursing background had enhanced the district's health services. The partnership between the Thompson family and local educational institutions had created a model for community-based support that other districts were studying and attempting to replicate. The medical debt that had initially destroyed Sarah's financial stability had become a distant memory, but the experience had inspired the family to advocate for healthcare policy reforms that would prevent other families from facing similar crises. Their testimony about the devastating impact of medical bankruptcy had influenced state legislation, providing better protections for families dealing with catastrophic illness, while their charitable foundation provided emergency assistance. to families facing similar circumstances. The legal precedent established by their successful guardianship arrangement had influenced similar cases throughout Colorado and neighboring states, with family court judges increasingly willing to consider creative solutions that prioritized family preservation over traditional placement options. Their case had been cited in law review articles and family court decisions, contributing to evolving understanding of how legal systems could better serve children's interests by supporting innovative approaches to family structure. The anniversary of their first meeting in the Millbrook County Courthouse had become a family celebration that acknowledged not just their personal transformation, but their commitment to helping other families facing similar challenges. Each year, they hosted a gathering for families who had benefited from the guardianship transfer program, creating a support network that provided encouragement and practical assistance to people navigating their own difficult transitions. The event had grown into a regional celebration that attracted hundreds of participants and volunteers. On this particular morning, as Sarah watched her family engaged in the activities that had become their comfortable routine, she reflected on the journey that had brought them from desperation to fulfillment through the intervention of a stranger who had seen potential where others had seen only problems. The courthouse hearing that had terrified her with its implications for her family's unity had actually been the beginning of possibilities she had never dared to imagine during those months when survival had been her only goal. Michael approached the porch where Sarah stood, his arm automatically circling her waist in the gesture of affection that had become second nature during their years together. His presence still brought her the sense of security and partnership that had first attracted her to his guardianship proposal, but their relationship had deepened into the kind of love that transcended gratitude or convenience. They had become genuine partners in every aspect of their lives, from parenting decisions to business operations to community service. The conversation that followed touched on the various activities and achievements that filled their days, from Tommy's upcoming graduation to Danny's latest art show, to the expansion plans for their therapeutic riding program. Each topic reflected the abundance that had replaced the scarcity that had once defined their existence. But more importantly, it demonstrated the purposeful direction their lives had taken since that pivotal courthouse meeting. They were no longer simply surviving, they were thriving while contributing to their community's welfare in ways that multiplied the benefits of their own good fortune. As the morning progressed and the family gathered for the breakfast that had become their daily opportunity to connect and plan their activities, Sarah marveled at the natural ease with which they had evolved into a functional unit that honored both their individual needs and their collective welfare. The awkward interactions and careful boundaries that had characterized their early months together had given way to the comfortable rhythms of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, while respecting each person's unique contributions to their shared life. The breakfast conversation revealed the various projects and interests that were engaging each family member, from Sam's excitement about an upcoming camping trip to Luke's research on sustainable farming techniques, to Ryan's preparation for state track championships. The diversity of their pursuits reflected the security that allowed each person to explore their potential without fear that individual success might threaten family stability. Their achievements enhanced, rather than competed with each other's accomplishments. Michael's announcement that he had been invited to testify before a Senate committee about veteran reintegration programs sparked discussion about the policy, implications of their success story, and the responsibility they felt to advocate for other families facing similar challenges. The recognition of their achievements had brought opportunities to influence systemic changes that could benefit countless other people, but it had also required careful balance between public advocacy and private family life. Sarah's own professional development had continued as she pursued advanced nursing education while managing increasing responsibilities with both the construction company and their charitable foundation. Her transformation from desperate single mother to accomplished professional and community leader demonstrated the potential that could be unleashed when basic security allowed people to focus on growth rather than mere survival. Her example had inspired other women in similar circumstances to believe that recovery from catastrophic loss was possible. The boys' individual updates revealed the continued development of talents and interests that had first emerged during their early months at the ranch. Tommy discussed his engineering internship and plans for graduate school, while Jake described his latest mechanical innovation and the patent application process. Danny shared news about the gallery that wanted to exhibit his work, while Ryan outlined his strategy for the upcoming athletic season that would determine his college opportunities. Luke's report on his participation in a statewide science fair reflected his growing confidence in academic competition, while Sam's animated description of his reading progress demonstrated the intellectual curiosity that promised future scholarly achievements. Each boy's individual progress contributed to the collective sense of accomplishment that characterized their family's approach to personal development and mutual support. The conversation also touched on the visits they regularly received from social workers, researchers, and other professionals who wanted to understand the factors that had contributed to their successful family integration. These interactions had become opportunities for them to share insights about healing, resilience, and the importance of community support in overcoming traumatic circumstances. Their willingness to serve as case study subjects had contributed to improved understanding of how alternative family structures could succeed when properly supported. As the family dispersed to pursue their various daily activities, Sarah lingered in the kitchen that had become the heart of their home, remembering the cramped apartment where she had once stretched single cans of soup to feed 7 people. The abundance that surrounded them now was measured not just in material prosperity, but in the emotional wealth of relationships built on genuine affection and mutual respect. The contrast between their current circumstances and their desperate past served as daily reminder of how dramatically life could change when courage met opportunity. The afternoon brought visitors to the ranch, as it did most days, with a delegation of state officials touring their therapeutic riding program, while a family from Denver met with Sarah and Michael about their own guardianship situation. These interactions had become routine aspects of their lives, but they remained meaningful opportunities to share the lessons they had learned about family resilience and community support. Each conversation potentially influenced decisions that could improve other families' circumstances. The visiting family's circumstances echoed Sarah's own memories of desperation and impossible choices as parents facing foreclosure and potential family separation sought alternatives to traditional foster care placement. The couple's obvious love for their children and determination to keep their family intact reminded Sarah of her own feelings during those terrifying weeks before the courthouse hearing. Her ability to offer hope and practical guidance based on personal experience rather than theoretical knowledge made her counsel particularly valuable to families in crisis. Michael's interaction with the father revealed the unique perspective that military service had provided in understanding both trauma and recovery, while his business success demonstrated that personal struggles need not prevent professional achievement when properly addressed. His willingness to share details about his own PTSD recovery and the role that family responsibilities had played in his healing provided encouragement to other veterans facing similar challenges. The state officials' questions about replicating their model in other communities sparked discussion about the specific factors that had contributed to their success. from adequate financial resources to community support to individual commitment to growth and change. Their analysis helped identify elements that could be systematized and supported through policy changes, while acknowledging that human relationships could never be reduced to simple formulas or guaranteed outcomes. Evening brought the family together for dinner and the informal discussions that had become their primary method for maintaining emotional connection despite increasingly busy individual schedules. The conversation flowed naturally between serious topics and playful banter, reflecting the comfortable relationships that had developed over years of shared experiences and mutual support. Their ability to discuss both achievements and challenges with equal openness demonstrated the trust and communication skills that had become hallmarks of their family culture. The bedtime routines that had once required careful attention and patient guidance had evolved into independent activities that reflected each person's maturity and self-sufficiency. But the family maintained traditions of goodnight conversations and expressions of affection that preserved emotional intimacy despite growing independence. Sarah's role had shifted from desperate protector to supportive guide, while Michael had evolved from uncertain guardian to confident father figure, whose authority was based on earned respect rather than legal documentation. As Sarah and Michael sat on their front porch after the boys had settled into their evening activities, they reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them from strangers thrown together by circumstances to partners united by choice and commitment. The courthouse hearing that had begun their relationship had been motivated by desperation and legal necessity, but their marriage had been celebrated as the natural culmination of love that had grown through shared challenges and mutual discovery. Their conversation touched on future plans and dreams that would have been impossible to imagine during their early days together, from college graduations and career launches for the older boys to continued expansion of their charitable programs, to potential grandchildren who might someday play in the same meadows where their sons had learned to ride horses and build confidence. The future that had once seemed terrifyingly uncertain had become a landscape of possibilities, limited only by their imagination and energy. The stars emerging over the Colorado mountains provided the same spectacular backdrop that had welcomed them to the ranch years earlier, but their appreciation of the beauty around them had deepened through the security of knowing that this magnificent setting was truly their home, rather than a temporary refuge from circumstances beyond their control. The transformation from desperation to fulfillment had been complete, but their gratitude for the journey never diminished. As they prepared to end another day in the life they had built together, Sarah and Michael acknowledged once again the remarkable chain of events that had brought them together and the choices they had made to transform a legal arrangement into a loving family. The veteran who had purchased a broken woman and her 6 sons at auction had discovered that rescue was a mutual act, while the desperate mother who had trusted a stranger with her children's welfare had learned that love could indeed appear in the most unexpected forms and circumstances. The story that had begun with tears of desperation had evolved into a celebration of human resilience, community support, and the power of love to transform even the most dire circumstances into opportunities for growth and service to others. Their family's success had become a beacon of hope for other families facing similar challenges, while their continued commitment to helping others demonstrated that true healing includes the obligation to extend help to those who follow in similar paths of struggle and recovery. The broken woman from the courthouse had been healed not through the elimination of her problems, but through the discovery that she possessed strengths she had never recognized and could build relationships that sustained her through any challenge life might present. The lonely veteran had found that his greatest victory was not surviving combat or building business success, but creating a family environment where love could flourish and individual potential could be realized without sacrificing collective welfare. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.